Hey crew, it's Presley. Today we are going to start your kind of medieval and up to about World War II China notes. It's going to be kind of straightforward. I'm not even going to do the intro music this time because I'm not at home on my home computer. So let's get this started. Hopefully, by the way, you should have gotten a new note set from the sub for you to fill out. I believe these are copied with the actual slides on them so you can see the images and stuff a little better. All right, so the human geography part of the notes. During the Han Dynasty, as the Han Dynasty collapsed, they went back into a rival kingdom period. And so there isn't this unified empire to fight those Mongols to the north. So you wind up with a mix of cultures as those Mongols are coming over the wall, or really just kind of around the wall, and into the northern part of what had been Han China. People who live there are fleeing south. And as they flee south, they bring culture with them. And people, some of the Mongol culture comes south. And people in the south kind of move around to avoid them as well. So you wind up with a change in culture. You wind up with new foods and new types of art, religion. People are turning to Buddhism as kind of an answer during this time of chaos. And it shifts, instead of regional aspects of culture, you wind up, this blending creates this concept of being Chinese, much like we have in the US. We've got the regions and we've got the South, and there are things that are unique to the South and things that are unique to New England, but there's still this piece of being American, this kind of American culture, cheeseburgers and baseball. So because of this movement of people, there are also agricultural changes, and the biggest change that happens during the Han Dynasty or after the Han Dynasty is the inclusion of a new type of rice from Vietnam called champa rice. And we're going to come back to champa rice when we get to the Vietnam unit. Excuse me. Sorry. No. But this new type of rice will grow twice in a single growing season. And this is a huge deal because double the food means more babies. So during the Han Dynasty, there was this explosion in population as healthy moms are having babies and babies are surviving to adulthood. There are new and better farming techniques to not only have more like a type of plant that'll grow twice, but better ways to care for it. The iron plow, that fertilizer, they figure out if you take cow manure and spread it around in the fields that things grow better. The chain pump from the Han Dynasty, and the idea of terrace farming, that's that when you kind of put your fields down the side of the mountains, instead of up and like on a hill, you actually cut out parts of the hill to make steps and you plant your crops in the steps. So all of this leads to more babies. There's a huge population explosion. So because food production increased, farmers don't necessarily have to grow as many fields. So they have a little bit more, I'm going to use the phrase downtime, but that's not really downtime. But anyway, that time that they used to be working in the fields, they're now spending in their homes making things to sell. Maybe they're making silk. Maybe they're weaving cotton into cloth. Maybe they're making wooden toys. But the idea is people are making goods to sell, not just crops to trade. So they're selling teas, they're selling rice, they're selling spices, jade, silk, porcelain, and they're buying different types of foods, different plants, wool, glass, gold, silver. And they're not necessarily buying a lot of this, but if you're making silk, maybe you can trade a couple bolts of silk for a piece of glass that goes in the counter. And it's this idea of something that's just pretty. Because of all of this movement of goods, they need a more reliable way to transport those goods. You also need better rates of exchange. I don't want to be carrying, 3 wheelbarrows worth of silk around with me everywhere. I want to be able to park my silk in a safe place. Maybe get a letter that says, I have this much value in silk that I can then trade. So they wind up with these deposit shops, and you could exchange goods and store them, but you could also exchange your coins. Chinese coins were these copper coins. Remind me when I see you all. I have a mock one in my dress drawer that kind of looks like the old coins here that I can pass around. But you put them on, they got a hole in the middle so you can put them on a string and carry them around. That's also going to make a lot of noise. You know what it sounds like when somebody's got a pocket full of change. So you don't want somebody to rob you. So you would take your coins to a deposit shop where they would write it out on a piece of paper. Now, paper money in and of itself has no value. Your American dollar bill is really just paper and cotton. It's not really worth anything. But we have an agreed upon value that it has a accepted value. So the Chinese come up with this idea of paper money. And there's kind of a picture of one of them there in the bottom. I want to note, you want to make note of paper money being a Chinese invention because that is on your final in the spring. So because there's more trade, you have a new kind of middle class starting. I'm sorry, I'm doing this at 10 o'clock at night and I'm apparently rather tired and yawning quite a bit. So you have the start of this new merchant class. They're wealthy, they like to socialize, and because their job is selling goods, when the stall closes for the night, they have their evenings. So this increases the standard of living, but it also creates these commercial centers. Large cities. Chang'an, the Tang capital, is going to wind up with 1 million people. This is in the Middle Ages. At that time, it winds up being the largest city in the world. Bigger than Paris, bigger than London. But what is it like to be in cities? It's crowded. It's exciting. There's shops and vendors everywhere. There's musicians and jugglers, not jugulars, jugglers, acrobats, puppeteers. You have money and you have time in the evening, so you start to see things that are done for just entertainment, theaters and restaurants, tea houses, food vendors. Nobody does street food like the Chinese. So this changes the way ordinary people lived. And you also have a lot of public works projects employing city dwellers. So not everybody who lives in the city is a merchant. Sometimes you build roads, sometimes you sweep streets. But it also stimulates the culture. This wealthy middle class, this merchant class, is going to be supportive of the arts and willing to spend money. And so you wind up with people who, make a living making art. So we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about the political developments. So the Three Kingdoms period is that time period where the Han falls apart, but the Sui have not gained control yet. So we call it the Three Kingdoms. There are 3 rival kingdoms. The first one, the Wei, they are going to really be about reform and shifting from those old medieval type ways. They don't last very long. The Shu are going to be very strict. They're going to be more legalistic and more focused on industry. And the Wu are going to be involved in shipbuilding. But because they each kind of go in different directions and people are moving all around, that movement during that kind of 300-year period is going to be what creates that Chinese culture, that sense of unity. So we talked about Buddhism spreading during the first unit, and then I mentioned it again here in the second unit. But the importance of Buddhism during the Three Kingdoms period is that it helps people find order during a time of disorder. And you also have missionaries who were spreading Buddhism beyond just China into Japan and Korea and other Asian nations. The map kind of does a good job of showing how how Buddhism is going to spread along the trade routes through China into Korea and then again into Japan. So the Sui dynasty is going to be the one that is going to follow the Han with that Three Kingdoms period in between. Yang Jian is going to conquer the south and unify China. Later, he's going to be called Wen Di, which means civic or polished emperor. He is going to start a project called the Grand Canal, and this is a big deal. Remember those 2 main rivers from your geography activity we did in the beginning? They flow kind of west to east to the coastline, and so there's not really a navigable way to cross north and south. So they're going to build a canal between those 2 rivers. He's also going to make improvements to the Great Wall. He's Buddhist, but he's willing to support kind of anything as long as it unites the people. And those projects he creates is part of what helps that. It doesn't last for long. After that's going to be the Tang Dynasty. They're known for their economic growth and development and a lot of discoveries. And during the Tang Dynasty is when we're going to have Empress Wu. Empress Wu is the one you're going to do your Janus figure on. She's China's only female ruler. Her husband was sick, and eventually he dies. And she decides her sons are not worthy to rule. So you're going to read about how she finagles getting herself into ruling. And she's known to rule with an iron fist. If people opposed her, they faced death. But she also did good things like choosing advisors based on their ability rather than their rank, and bringing some improvements. She searched for those outstanding individuals to attract to her court and, advise her well. She constructed a lot of new irrigation systems to help better the farming. Buddhism is going to be her favorite religion, and she's going to finance the building of a lot of Buddhist temples throughout China. But she definitely went after her enemies, and she used cruel and sadistic ministers to find them. So at this point, I would like you to kind of pause. Actually, you know what? Let's do 2 more slides, because then I can add another. Okay. So under the Tang Dynasty, there's a large bureaucracy. They continue to use the civil service exams to promote people to office. But the problem is, you have to be rich in order, even though it's open to everybody, you kind of have to be rich to be able to afford to buy the books to study, to be able to pay the tutors, and to not be working for years as you study. So in name, it's open to everybody, but in practice, people who have to work don't really get in there. Occasionally you might have, like the town realizes they've got a super intelligent individual, and maybe everybody chips in a few bucks to, hopefully get Junior here the schooling, but that's pretty unusual. Usually it's the children of the wealthy who maintain those jobs. I just wanted to show you this picture. I always thought this Tang Dynasty bronze dragon was the model for Mushu. I don't know that for sure, but it sure looks like him, don't you think? All right, so at this point, I would like you to go collect the Empress Wu article and Janus figure. It should be explained on there. And run through those. And you've got the rest of the hour to get that started. I know on the calendar it says it's due today, but I think I'm going to wait till Thursday to collect those. That way, if you have any questions, you can send me a message in Canvas, and I'll help clarify things. I'm also going to ask Miss Christensen to pull out a sample for you all to kind of pass around and look at out of my drawer. All right. If you have questions, send me a message in Canvas, and I shall see you all Wednesday or Thursday.